gather on got a message on my screen.
No, it was just I'm recording now.
For this reason, we gather on a regular basis as lay ecclesial ministers, deacons, priests, and bishops to continue our own education in these areas. We continue to learn from the past and from our local experience. We continue to learn from experts in the fields of counseling and medical care. We continue to learn from our pastoral workers. All of these lessons learned help us, as I said in the letter of promulgation, to remain steadfast in the pledge that we've made, that firm commitment to do everything possible to bring an end to clergy sexual abuse in our diocese. We don't have to look far in our own country to find that sexual abuse lingers. It rears its ugly head in so many ways, with the missing and murdered Indigenous women, with the many survivors of the Indian residential schools, and with victims of trafficking. The recent stories of Kyle Beach, the hockey player from the Chicago Blackhawks, and the ongoing very sad saga of abuse in our Canadian military are further examples of how victims making allegations were not listened to by the institution. These revelations remind us that sexual abuse continues to haunt us. These workshops are a critical tool for us to grow in awareness and to hone our skills to be able to see even possible dangers for others so that we can prevent any abuse from occurring. Today's presentation will give you a tool to use in your office, parish, or institution so that we can remain vigilant. We call this an environmental scan. You will hear about it today. We believe an environmental scan offers all of us a good tool to keep us alert to the possible danger of abuse and ways to check our own behaviors. Our goal is to maintain the safest environment possible in our parishes, offices, and institutions. We want to settle for nothing less. Thank you. Thank you for each of you for your participation today and your continuing cooperation in reaching our goal.
Thank you, Bishop Fabro. We're going to begin with a prayer. Claire will put it on the screen for us. This is a prayer that we have used with permission from the Diocese of St. Cloud. This prayer is included as an appendix in the new Safe Environment Policy. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Let us take a moment to recollect ourselves and to ask the Spirit's guidance as we enter into our workshop today. Praise to you, Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, source of all consolation and hope. By your Son's dying and rising, he remains our light in every darkness, our strength in every weakness. Be the refuge and guardian of all who suffer from abuse and violence. Comfort them and send them healing for their wounds of body and spirit. Rescue them from bitterness and shame and refresh them with your love. Heal the brokenness in all victims of abuse and revive the spirits of all who lament this sin. Help us to follow Jesus in drawing good from evil, life from death. Make us one with you in your love for justice as we deepen our respect for the dignity of every human life. Giver of peace, make us one in celebrating your praise, both now and forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. In publishing the 4th edition of our Safe Environment Policy for the Diocese of London, it was important that we gather as a community of bishops, priests, deacons, lay ecclesial ministers, and others who are involved in this work, so that we can look at the policy and learn what is new in it, as well as the responsibilities that we have, reminding us of some that we've had for some time and others that are new responsibilities for us. In a message to a conference in Rome about keeping children safe, which was published on the 4th of November of this year, just this month, Pope Francis called on all those who work with children to join together in an alliance to better prevent sexual abuse and other abuse of minors, and we would add of vulnerable adults. Pope Francis says the church is not only driven by the sorrow and the shame for not having been good custodians in protecting minors who are entrusted to our educational and social activities. We are driven, of course, too, by our love of God and love of neighbor. So Pope Francis described an urgent need for renewed training for all those who have educational responsibilities and those who work in situations with minors, in the church, in society, in the family. And that includes all of us, all of those of us in pastoral ministry in our Diocese of London. So it's an important part that we take on our own responsibility in ensuring a safe environment. So one of the bishop alluded to a tool that we want to introduce to you today. On the next slide, we refer to it as an environmental scan. So what we want to do today is present this idea of an environmental scan as a tool that we can use at least on an annual basis, if not more often, to make sure that we are doing all that we can to ensure a safe environment. Collectively, as the Diocese of London, within our parishes and institutions, and in our own work. So what we want to do today is review the documents that have been the building blocks for our own policy and our own actions. This gives us the context for the 4th edition of a Safe Environment for the Diocese of London. And then we want to look at some practical steps for doing an environmental scan. So that's our plan for today's presentation. We begin with looking at the resources. The newest version of Safe Environment document from the Bishops of Canada is the one that was released in 2018, called Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse, a call to the Catholic faithful in Canada for healing, reconciliation, and transformation. Excuse me. When Sharon was doing most of the work to put this presentation together, she found this nice little YouTube video, which unfortunately is no longer available, so don't write it down. But the work of the Canadian bishops in protecting minors from sexual abuse is based on the first document that they issued many years ago, From Pain to Hope. It's interesting, the Diocese of London had a document about safe environment to prevent sexual abuse even before the Canadian bishops produced theirs. So ours goes back a long way. But From Pain to Hope was a landmark document for Catholics across Canada, and it led to great awareness across the country of the scourge of abuse, and leads to our current document from the Canadian bishops and the work that we continue to do. I'm going to turn it over now to Sharon. Sharon, you're muted.
That better?
Yes.
So section 4 of the document that Father John was just referring to from the Canadian Catholic bishops deals with the protecting of minors, and it's a protocol, provides a protocol for the prevention of sexual abuse and for the pastoral response to complaints of sexual abuse. This protocol and response is mirrored in our policy document, and you would find it. This is a document. If you haven't received it, you should have received it. And section 5 of this policy document refers to the section 4 of the Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse document. So you'll see that we are in line. Our policy document has always been and continues to be in line with the Canadian bishops and the bishops of Ontario. I didn't highlight all the elements of the Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse document in section 4. I wanted to just highlight certain ones that you see on the screen. So the first one is that the ordinary appoints a delegate to deal with issues related to sexual abuse or to allegations of sexual misconduct. And at the same time as the delegate is appointed, then a deputy delegate would be appointed. And in the Diocese of London, Father John Kalmiski is the bishop's delegate. And at the moment, I am serving as the deputy delegate for the diocese. The protocol also requires that we have an advisory committee of at least 3 persons. Our policy document provides for more individuals, and we have a variety of people who are coming from the community. We have a psychologist, we have a retired executive director of Children's Aid Society, we have a civil lawyer, we have a canon lawyer, and Father Paul Bergeron, and we have educators and retired educators who have spent their careers working with individuals and minors. The allegation of sexual abuse against a member of the clergy is to be reported to the delegate or to the deputy delegate. So we can't just say, oh, no, we have to report it. The protocol also requires us to have a person responsible for relations with the news media. And in our Diocese of London, we have our Director of Communications, Matthew Clark. And 4.5 talks about the mechanism by which we inform the clergy, the members, and personnel of an institute about the approved protocol and the means by which we access it. And also the annual scan, we use policy and education sessions as needed or when policy is reviewed. So the policy document requires us to review every 4 years. And in the case of this, the 3rd edition was 2016. .6 becomes part of the educational process. And in terms of not just reviewing the policy document, but providing perhaps videos. Catholic Mutual, we have used in the past a video on grooming, and it helps us to understand better the process that leads to possible connections to sexual abuse. And it's important to remember that every accused person is presumed innocent until contrary is proven. The policy document isn't just based on the Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse document or From Pain to Hope. Also is reflected in canon law. And Canon Law 171722 says that at any stage of the process, in order to prevent a scandal, protect the freedom of the witnesses, and safeguard the court of justice, the ordinary can, after consulting the promoter of justice and summoning the accused person to appear, prohibit the accused from the exercise of sacred ministry or some ecclesial office and position, or forbid resistance in a certain place in a certain place of territory, or even prohibit public participation in the Blessed Eucharist. If, however, the reason ceases, all these restrictions are to be revoked. And you'll find that reflected in our investigation process, which you'll find in the policy document. And on to you, Father John.
Thank you, Sharon. Before we move on, I'm just going to mention that there have been revisions to the Code of Canon Law. Father Paul Béargent has been participating in workshops along with other Canadian canon lawyers, with experts from Rome and other places, including Canada. And the revisions to the Code of Canon Law have expanded the directives for lay people working in ministry in the church, as well as expanding the directives, also expanding the penalties that would apply for lay people who break the church's law. This is a more comprehensive view that has been brought to this work by Pope Francis. So it continues to build, and we'll probably have to, that'll probably be the subject of our next workshop. So again, we're back to the documents that are at the basis of ensuring a safe environment and the work that we do in our Diocese of London. In 2019, Pope Francis issued a motu proprio called Vos Estis Lux Mundi. Motu proprio means that it's issued under his own authority. And he adds his own perspective, calling us to accountability in the way in which we work with people and care for them. So Vos Estis Lux Mundi, you are the light of the world. And he's making sure that the procedures that are important for safe environment are universally adopted. That is by every diocese across the world. And so that we can prevent and, as it says, combat these crimes that betray the trust of the faithful. In the next slide, we have just a general overview of this document and its application, how information is received, reported, and protected, the reporting from an allegation and what is to be done about that, as well as the protection of the person who is bringing the report or bringing forward the allegation. A lot of it focuses on the care of persons, but it's the accused as well as the accuser. And Pope Francis is trying to make sure that this is a universal standard across the world. In the next slide, it talks about other aspects of it, indicates which is the competent dicastery that oversees this, that is the congregation in Rome. And it also talks about what to do if there's a report against a bishop or a report concerning a bishop. So this might be a report about a bishop who is alleged to have caused abuse or who is alleged to have tried to hide it or in some way sweep it under the carpet, as we would say. So very strict procedures about that, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Involved in this would be the duties of the Metropolitan. In our case, that would be the Archbishop of Toronto, Cardinal Collins. And then what to do to invest, entrusting the investigation to someone other than the Metropolitan, if the Metropolitan himself has allegations brought against him. So the next slide talks about how all these steps are done. And one of the important things to emphasize here is Article 19, the importance to comply with state laws. You know, even right now, in terms of the updates and the directives for the pandemic that come from Bishop Fabro's office, we are reflecting what are the expectations of the province of Ontario. And that has always been the case, that we must comply with state laws, that there's no way that we get around them. And so it's very important that, again, here we are in the world, and but not of the world, but necessarily we follow state laws. And one of that is how Sharon incorporated in the new version, the latest update, for instance, of the Act of the Ontario Government for the Protection of Minors. So the next slide talks about then a new reporting system that the Canadian bishops adopted in 2020, and a company called Clearview Reporting. And so since 2020, they worked on how this company would be of a use for us in the event that we have to report an allegation of sexual abuse by a bishop or cover up by a bishop. And so the Clearview reporting system out of the United States allows for 3 possible ways by which people may do this. First of all, to go online and to make a report. Secondly, to use a telephone hotline, or thirdly, to write and send in a letter. Some of our people not all have online access, but it's a way by which there's 3 clear methods by which people can report these incidents. And they can be reported anonymously so that people aren't afraid to speak up if they have been victimized in some real way. And again, Clearview, following the "You Are the Light of the World," the motu proprio from Pope Francis, follows the protocols of Pope Francis in receiving the report and then coming back to another bishop to carry out an investigation. So it's part of our new document. This has been added to our document before publication. So I'm turning it back to Sharon.
The next document that we want to review with you is one that you're all very familiar with, and it's the ensuring a safe environment. It's the Called, Gifted, and Sent document, which is a resource manual for the diocese. And this is used particularly with our volunteer ministers, how we equip them with knowledge and how we ensure the safe and caring communities of faith. Called, Gifted, and Sent, the purpose of it is to safeguard in all respects all those, but most especially the vulnerable to whom we minister. But I want everyone to understand that this document and all the documents we're reviewing today is not just for the vulnerable person, the minors, and those who are accused. It's to safeguard ourselves and the work that we do within our parishes and the diocese. So we ensure that as a faith community, we fulfill all our obligations, and we provide a consistent approach to the process and maintenance of current records. And that's very vital, important that we keep records of the work that we are doing and that we respect the privacy of everyone. The next slide pays particular attention to the code of conduct. On page 53 of the Called, Gifted, and Sent document, you'll find a code of conduct that reflected the 2016 version of our Safe Environment Policy document. When you review the 2021 Safe Environment Policy document, you'll find that the code of conduct has changed. And we have not as yet changed the code of conduct in the Safe Environment, or the Called, Gifted, and Sent document. That is something that will take place in the next few months. But the code of conduct in the new document deals with the planning of activities, and it deals with the behavioral aspects of priests, deacons, lay ecclesial ministers, and volunteers. And we'll a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The next document that we have is a circular letter that was published in 2011, and Pope Benedict. And the purpose of the letter was to assist Episcopal conferences in developing guidelines for dealing with cases of sexual abuse. And the link that's there, I believe, is active. I'll test it and then send it out to everybody as we finish this last workshop. And that's on to you, Father John.
Thank you, Sharon. This is a quotation from St. Paul's letter to the Ephesians, which I'm sure is known to all of you. And I just want to look at this. St. Paul writes, "I implore you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. We hear these words every year on the Feast of St. Matthew, September 21st. And it's a general call that reminds all of us that what is at the root of what we are doing in protecting minors and vulnerable adults and ensuring a safe environment is living this out. And that it's our personal responsibility not only to do the right things in our work, but also our personal responsibility to live our lives in a consistent manner with the teachings of the church, to live a life worthy of the calling to which we have been called. So it places the emphasis on our being the agent in order to, each of us being an agent to ensure the safe environment policy. But each of us being an agent by responding to God's call. This quotation was used as the basis for our document Entrusted with the Vineyard. And on Entrusted with the Vineyard is a document that unfortunately for many people is something that gets read and put on the shelf and forgotten. And this is, Sharon and I want to raise it because we have to see this as part of the building blocks for always working toward a safe environment and our responsibility in that. And this document, it's very short. If you haven't, it's available on our diocesan website. It's worth reviewing because it supports and strengthens leadership within the diocese and a culture of ensuring safe environment. And it emphasizes the fact that we must live our personal lives in conformity with the teachings of the church, not just try to do good work, but our whole lives must be dedicated to this. We cannot separate our personal life from our work. And so it Entrusted with the Vineyard reminds us of this important aspect. And it is also a way by which we are integrating our lives with our work. The next slide goes to the general principles that we find in Entrusted with the Vineyard. We conduct ourselves in a way that we are clearly seen as providing authentic witness. We live moral lives that are consistent with our state and life, with the teachings of the church. And we value and advocate for the dignity of all people. Entrusted with the Vineyard also has its code of conduct and identifies general principles, values, pastoral standards, and behavior for priests, deacons, and lay ecclesial ministers, and guides our relationships. And it's a way by which, again, these codes of conduct become benchmarks, if you will, become the standards by which we have to judge ourselves. And now it talks about our personal lifestyle, our relationships, our pastoral standards, ministerial relationships. And this document not only addresses misconduct, but addresses conflict that may happen within a parish team, within a parish community. So I hand it back to you, Sharon.
Thank you. You'll be familiar with this quotation from Jeremiah. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope. And you'll find this quotation in the document, Embracing a Future Full of Hope, with a pastoral plan from the Diocese of London. And this was released in 2004. The goal number one of the pastoral plan is, you'll note, is also quoted in policy document in the introduction of the document. It says, a living signs of Christ's presence, we will respond to the call to personal holiness given to all by committing ourselves to opportunities for ongoing conversion and spiritual renewal. The second goal, we're called by Christ. We're called to evangelize through the clear proclamation of the gospel and the constant teaching of the Catholic faith. Third goal, with our sights on the mission of Jesus, we will minister with justice and compassion to the wounded, the searching, the entrapped, and those in material and spiritual need. Those are the minors who suffer from sexual abuse. Those are the vulnerable adults that we all meet on a daily basis. Goal number 4, body of Christ formed by word and sacrament. We make provision for meaningful liturgical celebrations in our parish communities to ensure full, conscious, and active participation by all. So we welcome everyone through our doors. And we're invited to a co-responsible ministry to encourage and support the ongoing formation of the laity, the religious, and the ordained. And the last goal, imitating Christ, the servant leader. We will employ and model governance practices at all levels. And it shows you there the goals that we want to do that. Meet the needs of God's people, support the church's mission, ensure appropriate participation, uphold gospel stewardship, and promote accountability and transparency. In the foreword of the document, Protecting Minors from Sexual Abuse, it was written by Bishop Fabro. And he talks first of all about how badly hit our diocese has been by the crisis of sexual abuse and the burden that we all have to carry because of this scandal. And he also mentions that their safe environment policy has served as well. But for it to be effective, we all have to be vigilant and we all have to work together to ensure the safety of our children. And again, adding to that, the safety of our vulnerable adults. In the safe environment policy for the Diocese of London, the initial parts of it talks about the purpose of the document. It's prevention of sexual abuse, protection of the vulnerable, providing pastoral care for those wounded by misconduct, to acknowledge the legal rights of the accused, the appropriate action that we would take towards those who have committed sexual misconduct, and cooperation with criminal and civil justice judicial systems. The next slide. To ensure that the purpose is realized, we have an application and scope. Policy applies to all clergy with faculties to minister in the diocese, as well as to all employees, volunteers of the diocese. And that's why we brought in the other document of Called, Gifted, and Served, because that particularly relates to volunteers. Talks about how we respond to complaints in a timely fashion. And we respond to complaints, whether they're current, recent, in the distant past, and even at times to anonymous complaints. We ensure that the victim always has a primary claim upon our pastoral concerns, and we comply with and enforce provincial and federal legislation to protect minors. Also, a series of definitions that you find in the policy document. The one that I'm showing you here is the definition of a vulnerable adult. And this refers to a person who is defined as an adult by secular statutes, but who lacks adult capacity, or who, by reason of advanced age, physical illness, mental disorder, or disability at the time of the alleged abuse occurred, was or might be unable to protect him or herself from significant harm or exploitation. And this is important to remember, and it goes along with the other definitions that you find in the policy document. Father John?
Thanks, Sharon. The document for the Diocese of London goes beyond just the protection of minors. Sharon mentioned this definition of vulnerable adults. So we're trying to make it more comprehensive, but everything is in line with what the Canadian bishops have already decreed as the general norms. So we're going to look again through some of the roles, responsibilities. As you read this document, you will find that it is largely rewritten from what we've had in the past. The basic elements of the past are there, and the new elements that we have been asked to include in our work. But Sharon did a complete rewrite to bring the language consistent across all the sections, and to, as I said, bring in new information, the new material that we're expected to know from the bishop's document, Protecting Minors, as well as just making it across the whole document, just a much easier read. So it's basically rewritten, and we want to I'd like you to appreciate the work that Sharon has put into this, because the rewrite was basically her baby. Now, we worked on it together, and we brought it to the members of our Safe Environment Committee for their review, as well as other outsiders. We also brought our new version of the document to our lawyers, as well as to the insurance company, Catholic Mutual, which supports our work across the country. So these are roles and responsibilities that this is nothing new, but just rewritten. But as Sharon mentioned, I'm the Bishop's delegate. Sharon is the deputy delegate, as well as the director of Safe Environment Services. And then here again, the membership of this Safe Environment Advisory Committee. These, the Diocese of London has had a committee since 1989. Father Paul Béargent, who is our canon lawyer, our chancellor, as most of you know, Father Paul is the longest serving member of the committee with its various names and iterations. So he's definitely going to get a gold watch at his retirement. Long suffering. But Sharon also mentioned we have a civil lawyer, and this civil lawyer who works with us was also at some time worked with Children's Aid Society. So he has a real good grasp of the law for children and litigation, and a great person. He's in private practice. We have a mental health professional, a psychologist who has worked for years with the diocese, and many of us know him, Dr. Jim Mendonca. Other members of the community, Sharon mentioned that we have educators, retired educator who had special responsibility for children at risk. That would be Sharon herself. And as well as a current educator, a high school chaplain who works with young people, who has experience in various locales. So she brings a wealth of experience. We have a retired director of Children's Aid Society who brings great insight, again, to our work, especially as it deals with any allegations about minors. So we have a very well-rounded committee, and a committee of very dedicated people. And we just added new members. Oh, we also have a police officer who has served on our committee. Many of you might know Deacon Dennis Revest was on that committee for many years before he was a deacon, but he was on as a police officer, and he has stepped back from the committee, but we have replaced him with another police officer. So we're trying to have all the angles so that all these eyes are on situations that we look at when any cases are brought forward. And now I hand it back again to Sharon.
Thank you. Code gifted consent document and the policy document also include the duty to report. And as individuals, we have a legal obligation to report a suspicion of abuse of a minor who's less than 16 years of age. We are required to report to the Children's Aid Society. Failure to report promptly exposes the minor to increased harm and exposes the individual who fails to report to prosecution. And this legislation is found in the Child, Youth, Family Services Act of 2017. It's not sufficient to, never mind, I'll get into that in a second. Clergy, the lay personnel, or volunteers involved in any diocesan activity will report to the bishop's delegate all allegations of misconduct. When receiving a complaint, clergy, lay personnel, or volunteers are to limit themselves to listening and giving insurance. If someone has come to you with a complaint, that they have heard a complaint, it is still their responsibility to report to the Children's Aid Society. You can't step in and say, oh, well, I'll take care of that for you. And individuals should also be aware that all information that they are reporting will be given to the bishop's delegate. The additional part of the Act is the ability to, in addition to reporting allegations of abuse of a minor, is to report allegations of abuse of a 16 or 17-year-old Children's Aid Society. It's an option, it's not mandated, but it allows for those individuals who perhaps had association with Children's Aid Society before they turned 16, and Children's Aid Society may be able to give some advice and assistance to dealing with that individual. Article 8.9 of the policy document talks about how we inform an accused person that the allegation has been made. And if we can go back to the slide of the protocols. Thank you. How we follow up on an investigation, how we support the complainants, and how we support parishes where allegations have been made. Code of conduct, which I talked about on page 53 of the call, gift, and consent document, is also found in section 12 of the policy document. And the code of conduct is designed for all those who work or volunteer to work within a parish. So in creating a positive environment, we understand protection and promotion of the well-being of minors is a responsibility of us all. We are to embrace positively gospel values, and each parish within the diocese shall conduct an annual review of its environment to ensure that it's safe for minors and vulnerable people, and it's safe for you going in there to work. And that is equally as important. Article 12.1 deals with planning of events within the parish or within the diocese. And you'll see that it is very detailed in how we ensure the safety of those individuals who are going to participate in whatever event, say, for example, a summer camp or physical environment is safe. We need to ensure that there are gender-specific dressing areas. We need to ensure that any activity that children are involved in has the appropriate consent from parents and guardians. And that's the additional documents that we have provided for you in the policy document, is the samples of the waivers from guardians and parents, permission to participate, that you were educated on in the spring from Claire, Alex. Medical forms are important. And how we educate minors or vulnerable persons in safe and responsible internet practices. And that is equally as important. And in the call, gift, and consent document, you will find that our social media policy document is there for everyone to review. 12.2 of the document, the policy document, code of conduct, talks about the behavioral aspects of priests, deacons, lay ecclesial ministers, volunteers. It picks up many of the articles that were in the 2016 Code of Conduct, but also elaborates on that. And I'm not going to read them to you, but you can read them yourself. One particular one is that when we are celebrating the sacrament of penance with minors, ensure that it's in an open space that allows both the penitent and the priest to be in full view of others. It doesn't have to be within a hearing distance, it has to be within full view of others. And next, continues with document, the policy, the code of conduct. And an important thing to remember is when you are communicating via email, that you use your diocesan email account and not use your personal email account. Okay. The appendices that are provided in the policy document are the duty to report child in need of protection, and that's section 125 of the Child, Youth, and Family Services Act. and the sample parent guardian consent form and liability waivers. Also to Appendix 1 is the prayer for Father John shared with us earlier. And next, we're on back to Father John.
Thank you, Sharon. Claire, do me a favor, go back to the last slide for a second, please. I just want to emphasize something about duty to report. Thank you. So the duty to report, as this section included specifically because this is a duty, it's not an option. This is not something that you can delegate. You can't say, well, I told the principal, or I told the parish priest. No, if you witness or come into knowledge of any abuse of a child, 16 or younger, you must report it directly yourself. Now, we recommend that you go first to Children's Aid Society, and they will help sort it out. As Sharon said, if you suspect abuse against someone who is 17 or 18 years old, you are not required by law to report it, but it is highly recommended that you do. One of the things that Bishop Fabro did in appointing Sharon as deputy delegate is that we have either a man or a woman, priest or a lay person that people can talk to. So they may not feel comfortable approaching a priest if they are a victim of a priest. A woman may feel more comfortable talking to another woman. So this is that you can reach out to either one of us, and you can encourage people to talk to either one of us in first dealing with an abuse situation. And what we ask and what is expected as laid out in our protocols is that in the parish, you're not going to be doing any investigation. In the parish, you're not going to start questioning people or interviewing people. You are simply going to lead that person through the process to lead them to us, either Sharon or to me, to make a complaint or to register a concern. You need to show them that they are going to be trusted, that you believe what they have to say. We put the emphasis on believing people who come forward with allegations. Now, that doesn't mean that automatically that we would determine that the person against whom they bring a complaint is guilty, innocent until proven guilty. But to listen to these people to show that they can deal with this and move it forward is very important in the support that you give at the parish level or in your institution or your diocesan office. So it's very important, and emphasizing the duty to report, but then the duty of accompaniment, that you would help them to be trustworthy of the process. So I just wanted to add that before we move on. And now we'll go to the building blocks as a review of what we talked about this morning. So throughout all of our documents build one on the other. We have this, as you know, this is our fourth safe environment policy. So each one is built on the other. It's not we just don't put them aside. We just keep building as our knowledge builds and our experience builds. And then we've made reference to the circular letter from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith that came out under Pope Benedict, and our own document entrusted with the Vineyard, which came out a couple of years after that. And then our own Called, Gifted, and Sent policy, the latest version of Called, Gifted, and Sent, a revision that we did in 2018. So just as the bishops were finishing their work on protecting minors, we were doing a revision of Called, Gifted, and Sent. So that reflects some of the things that were already in the bishops' draft documents. Then Pope Francis expanding this across the world, and again looking at building on the work of Pope Benedict before him. And then finally, the bishops of Canada in their new document. And this is all in line with the pastoral plan. Sharon went through point by point of the goals of Bishop Fabro's pastoral plan for the Diocese of London. And you can see through them so much of this concern for accompaniment, for our work in protecting people, our accountability. All of that is all part of our pastoral plan. These are the building blocks to where we are today. And I want to say of the code of conduct that we've talked about, this it tries to summarize everything that we must do in terms of just providing the safe environment, ensuring a safe environment, and living our lives as authentic witnesses of the gospel. And I recommend that you read it really well and that you have it memorized. The code of conduct should be second nature to us. It should be something that we all know. We shouldn't have to say, oh, what do I do here? What do I do there? In terms of the overall process of dealing with abuse, the protocols are for that. But our code of conduct should be guiding our daily life, our ministry, and it's important that we have it, that we know it's second nature so that we just live it without having to check the book every day. So this is leading us now to our environmental scan. And so this slide shows basically the steps. So here we are in the parish, priest, deacon, lay, ecclesial minister, volunteer, or diocesan office, or related institution. There we are, and a situation arises. So our choices are that we now go to the safe environment policy to see what we should do or how we should deal with it. Or maybe it's at the level of bishop, and therefore we go to Clearview reporting and we follow the protocols there. But it's making the decision at the local level where we should go first. You can always call your bishop's deputy delegate or the bishop's delegate, and we can help guide you through any part of the process. But this is how we have to see ourselves. Okay. So now that leads us to our group work today. How to do an environmental scan. This is embedded in the introduction to our code of conduct, and a tool that Sharon and I developed so that you can do an annual assessment of the places around your around your parish or institution. You will remember that when we made adaptations to our called, gifted, and sent, and to our own our safe environment policy, one of the things we did was we insisted that every office has a window, either in the door or a window in the wall, so that people can see what's going on in offices. Nothing can be done hidden behind the door. We called for open windows in confessionals. Sharon talked about the optimum is that children's confessions are heard out in public space within sight, but not within hearing. But even if a child comes into the confessional or any person comes into the confessional, we need to make sure that both priest and penitent can be viewed, so that again, nothing evil is going to happen behind a closed door. So that's the kind of thing that we need to look around at our annual assessment. We need to review the programs that are in place already in our parishes. Are we following all the protocols for safe environment, for called, gifted, and sent, for entrusted with the vineyard? So we need to look at programs. We need to plan, look at this when we are planning new programs or services. And we also need to do a personal assessment. How am I living out the pastoral plan of the bishop? How am I living out the code of conduct? So what we're going to ask you to do is take a break. Claire is going to give us instructions on going into groups. And when you first go into the group, introduce yourselves and just plan a break and a time that you're going to come back and then come to the group. What we would like you to do is look at these 4 things. Now, Sharon and I came up with some ideas prior to our first presentation of this year, but we have been adding to our suggestions with ideas that have come from the other groups ahead of you. So we are building this tool as we go through our workshops across the diocese. And so we're asking that you will look at each of these 4 areas and come up with ways that you think the things that should be done in an annual assessment, reviewing programs, planning new programs, and personal assessment. We're going to ask that you appoint someone to be a recorder and spokesperson in that, and then to come back to the group after a certain time. So it is now 5 after 11, and we're going to give you 25 minutes. So to take a break and then to come back to the main group. And I'll turn it over to Claire for, Claire, back. Oh, no,
Sorry.
the other way, Claire, quick, don't give it away. Go, oh my gosh, Claire. Don't give them the answers. So
All
I'm
right.
going to turn it back to you, Claire, to give the instructions.
Okay, so in a minute, I'll open up the breakout rooms. What we'll ask you to do is accept that invitation before you go on a break. So accept the invitation as a group, determine at what point you'll come back from the break, if you want probably a 5-minute break. And then come back as a group. You're going to discuss these 4 things. I will shoot them in the problem with shooting them in the chat is that, or sending it to the rooms is that it disappears pretty quickly. So make sure you've made notes about the 4 things that we're going to, and then when we come back, we'll ask you to report on them if you have any things to add to the conversation. All right. So again, I'll open the breakout rooms, accept the invitation, then go on your 5-minute break, come back to your breakout rooms, and we will bring you back at what time, Father John?
11:30.
Okay. See you soon.
This is still being recorded, correct, Claire?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to pause the recording.